Our guest today started off with NASCAR, worked with a digital advertising agency, did some school, I hear, and then worked with Pizza Hut. Blake Parrish, how are you this morning?
Hey, doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to having you on the show.
Well, I've been looking forward to witnessing this in action. I've not gotten to come down and see the rest of the filmings, but I'm excited to be here. I don't know why you guys have me here, but
you'll find out momentarily.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's something that is great for our school, great for all of you, just to provide that different perspective. And I've gotten to listen to some of the episodes already, and so I'm blown away by it. So I'm super excited about it.
That's very kind of you. When I was a student, when I was doing my MBA program here, I remember thinking, I don't know who is ahead of us in this digital space. I don't know what other business schools or MBA programs have podcasts already going out there, but this is a step that it would really help us to take, regardless of who is or is not already in the space. This is a competitive advantage. And with previous hosting history, I remember thinking, I can help with this. And so it's something that I really wanted to do. Well,
I'm glad that you've contributed the time, because it is a big step. It's something people think it is just so easy. You just, you can set up a podcast on your phone and run it from there. And I've said the same thing as a marketing guy, just like, oh yeah, it's so easy. But I know that the time on our guests in the can, that it takes tons more out of the can to make sure that everything's produced well and that the listeners at home or in the car or whatever, that they receive.
Shouts to producer Kyle.
There you go.
Executive producer Bailey.
Yeah. And that they get something that is of value. And I think that's the most important thing, is that a format like this is meeting people where they are today. And so is podcasting going to be the thing in a year? Probably so. Is it going to be the thing in 5 years? Maybe not.
Maybe not. But regardless of that, hearing people voice intelligent opinions, that's something that I think we're always going to care about until it's no longer on voice and our thoughts are just beamed straight into each other's skulls. And also,
but that's another conversation for another day.
Right, conversation for another day. And we'd also like to thank Shannon Deere for all the work that she's done on this. Shannon's been instrumental in making this whole thing happen.
Cheers to the champion.
Yes.
She doesn't have a glass. I've got some coffee and some tea and some water.
I have some cream soda behind me.
There you go.
I'm going to hold off for now. Before we get into our icebreaker question, you and I are mirror images of a sort. You did your undergrad work here at Texas A&M, then went to Rice for your MBA. The reverse was true for me. I have great respect for Rice as an institution. Let's talk a little bit about the differences between the two places. How do you feel the culture there is the same as here? How do you feel it's different? Their schools are fairly close to each other, 100 miles apart, more or less. Rice A&M. Discuss.
Love it. That's an interesting one. So you look at the differences first, because those are kind of easy to spot. Rice is a private institution. So it is in the heart of a city. Yep. It's very much, I would call it landlocked, based on Med Center, all the other stuff going on down there. What is it? Herman Park.
Yep.
And then just, sprawl. It's not really sprawl because it's still downtown, but I think that private nature of it versus a public nature, you don't necessarily understand as a student, but it makes differences. So difference wise, I think A&M obviously is much grander on the number. And so my perspective is from a graduate perspective. Your perspective for Rice, this is on an undergraduate perspective. So there's differences there though too. The similarities are quite fun. There's a whole lot of pride in both of the institutions. And so it's funny, when I was early on in my schooling there, we saw the undergrads and they were out, and it was I think it was Owl Week or whatever the introduction week was. And there's different colleges, and mind you, the colleges are in dorms together. And so there's this immense amount of pride. And you see, again, Rice has this reputation for having incredibly smart students come in for undergrads that are, going to go and become very successful. And here they are, 18 years old, freshmen at college, and they are yelling just like hate songs in a playful way against the other colleges because they're building up that camaraderie within their college because they live together, they eat together, they almost do everything together. And so that was quite neat to see, but also very interesting to see these incredibly intelligent people coming and just not Neanderthals, but like very very raw, very basic about having this pride and very competitive. And so that competitiveness came out, and I'm assuming that it was already there, but that it just came out in a way that is guided against something else.
Right. So I have, as mentioned earlier, I have immense respect for Rice as an institution. I'm very grateful to Rice University and the Rice athletic programs. That was a formative time in my life, and I have a lot of really great friends there. I wasn't a huge fan of the residential college system, to be honest. A lot of it, what you're talking about, seemed kind of like regionalism in the sense of I was born in, for example, just pulling something out of the air, I was born in Ohio, so I dislike Michigan. I was born in Michigan, so I dislike when these two teams play each other, I'm going to cheer for one at the expense of the other, simply by merit of the fact that this is where I'm from, which, if you think about it, is something sort of random. And the residential college system is the same, but with actually an additional twist thrown in, which is it doesn't have to be that way. Like you could have people choose their residential colleges based on something. Now, the good side of that, in my opinion, is that they try to diversify each college. So each college has a certain number of varsity athletes. Each college has a certain number of architecture majors, a certain number of music majors. And so it's kind of stratified.
Yeah.
And there's something about that I think is beautiful.
Yeah. And I think, again, how we were talking about this medium, the podcasting, it gives those different perspectives so that you're almost forced into a community of people that are different from you.
Yes.
And I think that's extremely beneficial to how you're saying.
There's definitely something to be said for that.
And then I think that, again, the similarities between Rice and Texas A&M, the traditions. I mean, we're talking a lot about how there's the college system, and that goes back for so long. I mean, I think it was, what was it? It was when I was in there. And it was the Rice opened like 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago. And so there's just this rich culture that has developed. Likewise with Texas A&M. I mean,
no question. Texas
A&M undergrad is unlike anything else. And I can only assume that because that's the only thing that I know. And so, but it was right for me, and it wasn't right for some other people. And I think that, it's really hard to really understand it. And that's the fun challenge that I get on a daily basis, is to convey what happens within Texas A&M, within Mays Business School, that makes it unique and special. And we only have our comparison points compared to other places, but from anecdotes of friends of mine, they, visited me in college and they were like, wow, this is a real school. This is like a real school. There's community, there's pride. It's not just hanging out and playing a sport together and going and partying. There's things that really make this culture. And I think that's something really important for any student, undergrad, grad, whoever, or faculty member or staff to understand, is that they're culture makers here. And so they direct that.
One thing that I think has changed in the last 10 years that's fairly important for Texas A&M when it comes to Texas A&M's relevance on the national stage, is we've gotten past the Texas thing. And I think changing conferences was a big deal for that. When I was here for my first round of grad school, and then growing up here in this community my entire childhood, I remember thinking that the Texas A&M dynamic was not great for this university. And especially in the Big 12, there was a sense that it was Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and then
the rest of them.
And even in the second tier, Texas Tech was really good from 98 to 2008, 2010, maybe something like that. And so there was this sense that it was us and them, and maybe Oklahoma State sometimes in the second tier. And I don't know. I think it wasn't great, but moving to the SEC and sort of in the same way that Florida and Florida State and Miami each kind of have their own thing.
Yeah.
In the state of Florida, we have our own thing in the state of Texas now, and that has been so good for us. And Texas is a great institution, and I'm sure that they will always find ways to be successful in a variety of areas. They're just too well run not to be.
Absolutely.
But I think that it was good for us to forge our own path, and whether your conference affiliation and varsity sports are what define you as an institution or not, which I think you and I would agree that's not what defines you as an institution, but it is the front porch.
It's an influence.
Yes.
It's an influence. Yeah. I've got a fun perspective on that, in that my wife is a Longhorn.
Oh, okay.
And so my quick story, and we'll probably get into this, is that I moved back to College Station to come work at Texas A&M Mays Business School after being away from College Station as a student for 12 years, 13 years, something like that. And, I graduated in 2005, where that rivalry was rich. I mean, when we first started dating, my wife and I would sit on the couch next to each other on Thanksgiving Day and just kind of have to play it cool, right? Have to just be okay and understand like, somebody's going to be kind of upset after today, and just get over it.
Sure.
Now we come back, and I thought coming back, my wife had a Longhorn on her car, like a little emblem. And I was like, honey, we gotta take that thing off your car. Otherwise it's going to get like ripped off, or your car's going to get defaced. And she was just like, no.
All right.
And I was like, yeah, no, that's okay. And anyway, coming back, I found that the rivalry wasn't nearly as strong. I wouldn't even call it a rivalry anymore. Yes. Based on, it's funny the different perspectives that we have. Like I was talking with somebody this past weekend that was in from out of town, out of country, and just talking like, well, hey, who's your rivalry now? Who is your rival now? I was like, well, we as Texas A&M tend to think that Alabama is ours, but they don't. They're the number one school in the nation. Mm-hmm. They could kind of care less about us, right, because they're on this insane echelon. They're basically an NFL team. And this is all talking sports. But then, we talk about LSU being the team on Thanksgiving that we play, and that's something, but still not quite the same. So who is our rivalry now? I don't even know.
Yeah, and then we have the game in Dallas with Arkansas.
Yes.
Every year, and it's interesting because we played Arkansas before going over to the SEC, and they would beat us like a drum every year. And then we arrived in the SEC and could never stop beating them. And I'm sure that will flip back over on its head at some point. But I would say that is sort of. To me, if you ask me, you have to choose. I would say either LSU or Arkansas. I'm not sure which one I would pick right now.
Yeah, and even us talking about this, the SEC, it's interesting from my perspective as a member of the staff here at Mays Business School, and looking at how the academics, the other than football, other than sports, is using the SEC as a way to make entrails. And so our McFerrin Center for Entrepreneurship is part of, bringing back the SEC pitch competition. And so, entrepreneurs pitching their businesses, and that being a competition, and us having this community of business schools to go out, and actually not just business school, but schools in general, to have this community, this rivalry, to come together and have something to award a trophy for other than athletics and its academics, and it's, really using brilliance. And like, again, we're going to win some, we're going to lose some, but that's the way that I see forward. I mean, you look at esports, which I know you're extremely interested in, and I'm really curious about. That's a new way forward. It's not just going to be football going into the future. It's going to be so many other niches that happen. So, these offshoot sports. So like I played lacrosse growing up in high school and here at A&M. And that was just kind of this, I don't want to call it a reject sport, but it was a reject sport because I got cut from the basketball team my 8th grade and 9th grade. And my mom said, hey, do you want to try out this sport called lacrosse? And I said, sure, whatever. Let me try it out, and fell in love with it. Yeah. And so now I think that so many people with gaming, with entrepreneurship, with all that there is out there, there's these communities that are going to thrive, especially within the confines of a conference like the SEC. And it's just going to be a beautiful thing. Not that we don't love sports. Not that we're not going to love sports, but that these other things are going to become as important as sports.
You mentioned the McFerrin Center for Entrepreneurship. Is that Artie McFerrin?
Yes.
The same guy whose name's on the indoor practice facility.
Exactly.
So let's back up. What is your favorite superpower?
I thought a lot about this one. What I wish now at my age, and by the way, I'm in the ripe old age of 35, so it's something, but instantaneous healing.
Oh,
that's what I want, right? And everybody's laughing in here, but I thought about it, and it's like people think about like, oh, reading minds or whatever it may be, but like I feel so old sometimes when I go for a run or go for a bike ride or try to play with my kids, and I'm spent. Right. And you tear a new cut on your arm and it like takes a lot longer to heal. Whatever it is. I've been listening. We'll talk about podcasts later, but listening to a podcast and they spoke about traumatic brain injuries. And I don't have concussions that were diagnosed. Again, lacrosse. We'll talk about that later. But an interesting perspective is that when you are younger, you can recover from those things faster because there are injury protocols against concussions now. And the younger you are, the faster you will recover. And so in my older age, I would love to recover faster. That being from, a bad night of sleep, a hard workout, or just whatever may happen.
Instantaneous healing is certainly the one where in the superhero movie, when the hero decks the bad guy or like cuts his arm off or something, and then it immediately like regenerates or whatever. That's the one that you're like, oh, what are we going to do now?
Right. And there's just this like, they are unstoppable. So it's not only like physical, like that you're physically like scared, but that it's like this mental game too. Like, whoa, this guy can just like heal himself. Or this girl can just like heal herself. That's crazy.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago the idea of coming back to College Station. You are now the director of, I want to make sure I get your title right, Director for Marketing, Communications, and PR for the business school?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. Well done.
Was there a certain event that pointed you back here?
Other than a job offer?
Well, yes.
I will say yes. And I can't quite explain it. And so, I know that many individuals around Texas A&M are Christians, are believers. And I really think that I came upon a situation where it was inexplicable about how my family and I got back here, but it's only by the grace of God. And I don't say that lightly. Because this, it's not like, oh, it was just like flowers and beautiful music and there was ringing in my ear that this happened. It was actually an extremely hard process and it was extremely tough to work through. So, I say that with this opportunity that I was in the restaurant industry previously, and I had opportunities within the restaurant industry and this one offered to me. And I looked at those, and I'm cutting to the chase here, is that I looked at those and there was this signal in the restaurant industry that said, these values are not lining up exactly with who you are and who you want to be. And this opportunity at Texas A&M and at Mays Business School with the values that are present are more in line with what you are and who you want to be.
Any values in particular that jump out at you? Not necessarily from the restaurant, not necessarily red flags from elsewhere, but things that you fixed on in terms of the values that you did want to be aligned with.
Totally.
Specifically.
And, it's not one listed in the ACCI values necessarily, but like this focus on families. And I am a father of two, and we are actually expecting another one. Big news.
Congratulations.
Number 3 on the way.
That's great.
But even that is, focusing on the family. If I had remained in the restaurant industry, I don't think that a number 3 would have been within the realm, within the cards, because, and I give so much respect to those who are in the restaurant industry, and I'm not slamming it by any means. It's right for so many people, but it wasn't right for me with the time that I wanted to give to my family. And so I don't want to be, and actually my wife and I were having great discussions and arguments and talks this weekend about this focus on work versus the focus on family, and, everybody's unicorn, the balance, the work-life balance. And it's interesting. But, it came down to the fact that I held in my hands these offers, these opportunities that I saw, one, that I could go and work hard and be successful in a work sense, or I could go and work hard and be successful holistically. And, again, I'm not trying to slam the restaurant industry. It just wasn't right for where I wanted to lead my life and where I wanted to lead my family.
What do you think makes a leader? You talk about leadership. What do you think? What's the most important aspect of leadership for Blake?
I'll let that silence just sit a little bit longer.
Take your time. We can cut around if we need to.
No, we shouldn't cut stuff out. I mean, there should be this pause. There should be this drama. And I'm not just stalling, by the way. I've got the answer inside my head. I think the most important thing for a leader is to listen and to think and to understand and to gain perspective, to gain understanding, and then make decisions. So it's not just one thing. It's listening, it's considering, it's deciding, and it's communicating those decisions. And I think that's extremely important, to respect the process and to allow individuals to be heard, and then a very clear direction and why.
So you think the mistakes that leaders make, in your opinion, the way that people would fall short in this way is by getting those steps out of order or not giving enough time to a particular step in the process? What is a way that someone would fail to do that effectively?
And by the way, I fail on this all the time. I've got this bias for urgency and for speed. And so, it's someone that is short circuiting those. It's someone that is giving face time to listening, but not really listening, already having made up their mind. It's someone who is making a decision and then either changing it or not communicating it clearly. And not, another one is making a decision and it not being in line with the vision, the values, the mission of the organization in which all of them are a part of. And so there's so many ways to do it wrong. And I would say that there's so few ways to do it right. And I don't have that figured out. That's just my articulation of it. And I think a very important thing that someone spoke to me, and actually it was a professor at Rice, Dr. Vikas Mittal. He said, every time your situation changes, your definition of leadership needs to change. And so if you have someone come onto your team and you're the leader of that team, whether by title or by the work that you do, even if you're a peer to that person, your definition of leadership needs to change. If in your family life, your situation changes, whether you move or something's happening at home, your definition of leadership needs to change. In your outside organizations, when you go through a strategic planning process, there's a change there. Your definition of leadership needs to change. And I think, sorry to cut you off there, Ben, but I think it's extremely important for leaders to understand their role. And so there's some things that I've grown into in my role that, I don't want to be the center of attention. I don't care to be, but there are times where this role demands that. And so I need to play that role to ensure that those who I lead are heard, are cared for, are represented. And it's not necessarily in my comfort zone to be the one that is a spokesperson or the center of attention or doing other things, but my situation has changed, and therefore my definition of leadership has had to change.
I think that just makes sense. Leadership is at some level kind of the implementation of economics on personal relationships. And when I say economics, I don't mean economics in a monetary sense, although sometimes that's the case also. but it's the economics of utility and helping your team maximize its utility.
Yes.
And so the way that you do that has to change based on the inputs, what's going into the team. You know, each personality is an input at some level, and
their talents,
your external situation, the venue in which you have to perform, etc.
I mean, look at Porter's 5 forces for those MBA folk.
Exactly right.
It's all around there, and you know, there's something about a leader that needs to bring out those strengths, and I believe so in a coaching way, in a way that is based on affirmation. And again, I fail all the time at that. There's always those times where you just kind of fall into this stage where you're fearful and you fall into bad habits to almost, I don't want to say like scare your people, but like you don't coach them up. You don't affirm them. You don't give that time to them to build them up. Instead, you're just in a different mode and you don't get the best out of them. Whereas when you play on their strengths, and I would say that you figure out ways together as a team to build upon those weaknesses you have, whether it's outsourcing, whether it's hiring on new talent, whether it's just not doing that thing and clearly communicating it. Again, this is like utopia, ideal world, right? And it's so much easier to talk about than it is to put it into action. But at least having that mindset and that trust between you to say like, hey, you know what? Maybe we're not good at, I don't know, whatever. Maybe we're not good at, in my instance, maybe we're not good at email marketing. Maybe we don't have someone that is the best email marketer, and that's, you know, not true, but maybe that's the case. Maybe we need to go outside and have outside help, but it takes resources to do that. It takes time, effort, attention, and then also making sure that the group knows those strengths, knows where everybody is, so that we can say, you know what, we can deliver on that, or we're not able to deliver on that right now, but let me point you to the best resource.
So what you are leading people toward right now is the differentiation of a brand, is setting apart Mays Business School. We're in a world that is information heavy, instantaneous, hard to predict. If there was one counterintuitive lesson you've learned about differentiating a brand in this world heavy on information, short on attention spans, what is that thing? What is that lesson?
I think the most counterintuitive thing that you can have in marketing is that the simpler, the better. Because you can go out and you can use big words and you can try to be impressive with your language, but it goes over the heads of so many people, and not in a sense of that they're not intellectually capable, but in the sense that there is so much noise out there. I've read lately that there's between 5,000 and 7,000 advertisements that hit a person every single day. So in one form or another, there is a brand message, a marketing message, an advertising message that reaches people, and that's over 5,000 per day. And so even as I look at you, Ben, I'm looking at the microphone and there's a brand on there, Sure, right? And so I've seen that. I see, you know, emblems on cars as I drive here today. And so that's noise that comes in. And so I think that as a marketer, as a business person, I really try to look at that human element and strip everything down to the most basic fundamental. How do you play pitch and catch with someone? How do you enter their mind space? Not my space, their mind space. All right, no Toms in here. But how do you, oh man, that's going to go over some people's heads. They're, you know,
yeah.
When did MySpace die officially? Like before Justin Timberlake came on board? Kyle, do you even know about MySpace?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But like, I think that's the most counterintuitive thing, is that like less is more. And I think that if you can fundamentally break down exactly what you are trying to convey in the most simple terms, then it makes it easier to understand. And as a business school, everywhere you hear like, oh, it's the culture, it's the people. That's why I want to be here. And so, you know, with fellow colleagues like Shannon and my team and others that are pursuing videos to showcase especially former students, and not exclusively former students, but to showcase former students mostly, but then others as well, to break down in the most simplistic of terms, what is different about Mays Business School is X. And it's not about telling them, it's about showing them.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know how much work goes into simplicity. You know, there was Oscar Wilde who apologized for writing a long letter because he didn't have time to write a short one.
Yes, exactly.
And there was a quote on the wall of the study of the executive producer I used to work with that said, I think it was a Mark Twain quote that said, the difference between the almost right word and the right word is the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning. And so we talked about leadership earlier, but separately, what do you think is your biggest personal strength in the marketing world as it plays to this simplicity you're describing, or as it plays to something else? But what sets you apart? What made you a good fit for this? Gravitas.
The areas in which I have failed.
Oh.
Because in those areas I have failed, amongst my tons of experiences, I have learned.
Okay.
And I've learned more in the failures, whether they be large or small, than I have in the successes.
So then the obvious next question is, what was your most valuable failure? I'm going to skip. I'm going to bring forward one of the rapid fires.
Yeah, it's great. So one of the previous question was presented in a marketing sense. I'm gonna shift that just a little bit to this one.
Yes.
And so in a life sense, the most valuable failure I've had is to be fired.
When were you fired?
Lately.
Yeah.
Lately.
Okay.
But the value in being fired was that I was in a role that was not right for me. I was in a place that was not right for me. And I was extremely focused on myself. So much so that it just spun and spun and spun. And I constantly looked at myself for my shortcomings in trying to measure up to this level that I thought was what my managers needed. I thought that what the organization needed, and I couldn't get there. And so I was fired from that, and it was the right thing, right? And through that failure, I learned so much about myself, and I learned so much about really even work as a whole. And so again, we're on this trajectory as a life, and my hope, my thought is that I'm on this upward trajectory. And during that time, I wasn't personally. I mean, I will come out and say it, is that I dealt with depression and anxiety, and especially during that time frame, because I was so focused on self. And so coming out of that, there's so many ways that when I did get fired, there was this pressure that was taken off my shoulders, and I made leaps and bounds back to becoming myself. And there were other things that happened. There were other strategies that went against it. And, you know, I know that so many out there deal with depression and anxiety more than we can even imagine. And it's not something to be taken lightly. And it's not something to be accusatory. It's something that we all need to recognize. It's real. It's prevalent. We are in the richest nation in the world, and yet we are the most unhappy. I don't know what studies say that, but I believe it. And I think it's because we have such a pressure on ourselves, such a focus on ourselves, instead of, for me, extrinsically, or I guess intrinsically, my faith is so much more important than myself. And so focusing on the creator instead of the created myself was much more important. And so through counseling, through prayer, through, friends, through support network, through family, through, tons of discussions, I have improved, and not just like this, oh, I'm going to be better, and I'm going to be a better worker, and I'm going to work harder, and I'm going to make more money. It's that I'm confident, I'm comfortable with myself, and I'm comfortable with my limitations. And more aware of myself than I was previously. And so it sometimes takes that, and I don't want to call that a rock bottom, but it takes going through situations like that to understand what is right and what is good, and trade-offs, really. I mean, you learn a lot about that in business school, is trade-offs. And so, if you want to have your cake and eat it too, like, you're going to have to give up some stuff.
And that's true at the individual level as well. Sorry, as that's true at the level of individualizing education as well. What's best for Kyle may not be best for me as a student.
Yes.
What's best for Shannon may not be best for you. As you move forward with an institution of higher learning, what do you think are the most important things you're learning about how we can individualize education? Because part of our brand is we can make this right for you, whoever you may be. And not everyone is a good fit here, but I think that making Mays Business School and Texas A&M broadly accessible is one of the most important things that we're trying to do here, that you're trying to do here. What are the most important steps we have to take to get that message out into the world?
I think an extremely large value proposition of Texas A&M as a whole, and this isn't exclusive to Mays Business School, is that we have over 1,100 student organizations. And that, I think, is a huge differentiating factor in that. And again, I'm only coming to understand this as I come back as a staff member, not necessarily as a young, maturing individual that's in college, is that in each one of those 1,100 student organizations, there are student leaders. And even more so important than being a member of those organizations and all those who are involved there is the leadership aspect, because there are students that are leading other students, whether they be peers or underclassmen or whatever it may be. But that biggest growth is happening within those, let's say, I don't even know how many there are in Freshman Business Initiative, but let's say that there's 20 sophomores. Those 20 sophomores are learning so much more that will be applicable to life than the 900 freshmen that are actually in the Freshman Business Initiative. And that's not to say that those 900 aren't learning a lot, because they are learning a lot. But in real world practice of those 20 student leaders, and then even the juniors and seniors that are above them, they're learning this different aspect of leadership. And so I would say that's such a ripe opportunity and a ripe differentiation for us to learn.
So then how far can you carry that out? Like, one of the other questions that I have for us today is the most important way to make students feel empowered in taking the business school to new heights. Do you just keep running that? Like, are more organizations finding new ways to help students organize themselves and continuing to grow in terms of quantity, as long as the quality remains? Is that always better?
That's an interesting question. And, engineering here at Texas A&M has this goal by 2025 to have 25,000 engineers. Mm-hmm. Mays Business School does not have that same goal. Mays Business School is enrollment capped in their undergraduate program. And I think it's a blessing and a curse. Okay. It's one where, hey, more growth, more students, more opportunity for students to come in and gain that experience within business at Texas A&M. But that cap also, because of our physical limitation of space, but also because of having that quality, we can focus on that quality and making sure that we can replicate that. Because I think that when you start smaller, not that we're small, we're at, I think, 5,000 undergrads at least. When you start small and you learn how that works, then you can scale up more and scaling slowly. I've found, especially we go back to the restaurant industry, I found that when you scale fast, it makes it really difficult to keep a control on quality. And so when I worked with Rudy's Barbecue and their brand, and they could care less about growing fast. Mm. They just wanted to make sure that they would go find the right real estate, continue the excellence and quality that they have. Don't grow too quick, because they needed to make sure that they had the right people on board doing the right thing, trained well, and continually trained well. And so they kept their tribe small intentionally. And so they're not going out there going after VC money. They're not going after, public money, doing an IPO or anything like that, because they're fine. And they had that, I don't want to call it fortune, but they had that ability because they were privately owned, didn't have pressure from other people, from investors, to grow it too fast. We talked earlier about individualized education. And it's interesting because you balance that individualized education with the scale. And so again, we have 5,000 undergraduates. We're talking about undergraduates. And so undergrads holistically need to have the theory behind business as well as the practice and the education there. Now, you can't go and individualize education in the real world sense of one-on-one teaching to every single one of those 5,000. It's impossible. Otherwise, how much does a professor make, and how much would that be? It's just unrealistic.
The resources don't balance.
Exactly. And so it's a lot like marketing, right? Like in an ideal world, I would have, for every person that I would have in my target audience, I would have one marketer going and telling that person about Mays Business School.
Or 3 marketers.
Yeah. Right. And that's unrealistic. And so you look at this balance between scale and personalization, individualization. And I think that technology has really improved that capability to help identify target markets and tendencies of what they would like based on their behavior and based on similarities between other pools of people based on what we know about them. And so it's funny. It's sounding a lot like Big Brother, sounding a lot like 1984, sounding a lot like all the stuff that went down with Facebook. But like, there is advantage there, because getting that access, especially to diverse populations that we have not traditionally brought in here, requires that population to be aware of it. And so for us to reach that message, or get that message for them to reach and access and understand, getting it back to that simplification piece, is extremely important. And we have the saying here that from the outside looking in, you can't understand it. From the inside looking out, you can't explain it. Well, that's a huge challenge. Sure. It's my job to be on the inside and explain it to the outstanding, to the outside.
Right.
And so my team and I really try hard to do that with the opportunities that we have within us. And we look at the market that is available to us and the technology that we have available to us right now. This podcast is one of them. We put out publications throughout the year. We put out email newsletters. We have the website. And so all those different things are integrated, and we're attempting to make them as seamless as possible. And I was having this great conversation with our CIO, Sean Jasperson, earlier last week or the week before. And it would be so amazing. It would be so visionary to have our physical space in the Wayner building where Mays Business School is housed, and that there would be this seamless integration with our digital space. And so you walk in the doors, and ideally you would intuitively know where you wanted to be. I want to go see Shannon Deere. And you would ideally know, and again, reading minds type thing, that, okay, Shannon Deere's on the 3rd floor, and here's how to get to her office. And, here's how she looks, so that if you've never met her before, you could go and meet her. But how do we get to this place where our physical presence as Mays Business School is integrated, is seamless with our digital presence, so that you walk up to a wall in the Wayner building and you click 3 buttons and you go, okay, I'm here to meet Shannon Deere. Boop, boop, boop. Here's her bio. Here's her room number. Here's her picture, so that you can know what she looks like as you go in, and you're on your merry way. Say even the elevator is tuned to get you to the 3rd floor. Take that a step farther. You walk up to this wall in the Wayner building, and it notices your presence. And it says, how can I help you? I don't recognize you, right? Scary, Big Brother stuff, but also the beneficial. And you say, I have a meeting with Shannon Deere at 3:30. And it pulls up Shannon's bio, her photo, her room number, sets the elevator to get you up there. But then it also does this thing where it says, I will let Shannon know that you are here. right? And so there's this seamless integration of digital and physical, and it just shows you. So that's making populations aware and making it easy for them to access.
I think what you're talking about is maybe not so far away if you ran it through people's smartphones. You have your appointment with Shannon Deere on your smartphone. You take it up, you put it next to something that syncs, your calendar with what's going on in the building. And I don't know. I don't know that this is that far away. Let's shift gears for one last question, then we'll move to some rapid fire. So what do you think is the best way to position this business school for the future? You've talked about simplicity, you talked about individualization. And obviously, you and I place a lot of emphasis on Texas A&M's values. We both value those things tremendously.
Well done.
Forgive the pun. But so what is the most important thing in your mind to positioning this brand for Generation Z, generation, whatever's coming, our next set of students? What do you have to do?
I am fortunate in that I came in at the time that I did.
Yeah.
Because I already have a playbook for that. And if I can just follow my playbook, then it will play out, and we'll get to update that playbook as we go along. But we have the strategic plan through which Dean Jones led this entire college through in a grassroots way to get buy-in, to have town halls, to have input and decisions made by not just one person, but rather the collective of Mays Business School as a culture. So faculty, staff, students, et cetera, to come in and bring that. And so the vision is to advance the world's prosperity. And so in his words, that is extremely aspirational, but it's also attainable. And so following along that, we have these missions to be a vibrant learning organization, to develop transformational leaders, and to create impactful knowledge. Did I get that one right? I think so. All right. Create impactful knowledge. Something about teaching and learning. I should really know this because this is my playbook.
Learning community. You got them.
Okay, good. And so following along those three things, if I can, all of the work that I do, if it doesn't point to one of those or to that vision, then why am I doing it? And so that's the way that I need to position it, because Dean Jones and the whole collective that took on that strategic planning went through the process to understand what are our strengths, what are our opportunities, what does the marketplace need. And so we as a group, I was looking at this past Friday. In fact, we as a group are putting out the At Mays magazine, which will be in your inboxes or in your mailboxes early November. So look for it. I hope that this releases before then. I know that's me. No. All right. You should have your At Mays by now. And so the At Mays magazine that is coming out in the fall of 2018 is focused on healthcare, which is one of our grand challenges. Another grand challenge is energy, and then the third one is entrepreneurship. And so we have this playbook. And so what I get to do, what I have the opportunity to do, is to continue to build this story, this narrative about how Mays Business School is advancing the world's prosperity in all these realms. And so, again, being a marketing guy, marketing head, I look at all the stakeholders that we have, which is awesome because it's all laid out for me, and it's just employing those to tell our story. And so that's Mays faculty and staff, and it's those prospective faculty and prospective staff, and then it's also deans and individuals at other colleges, especially within the AACSB and the SEC. You look at the Aggie community, as we call it, former students, current students. You look at other individuals like PhD students who are doing incredible research. You look at faculty right now that are doing incredible research. They're all coming in to tell this one story. And so what you're going to see is that this narrative is going to be showcasing these strengths, these opportunities, and this marketplace need about those individual grand challenges that we have and how we are going to advance the world's prosperity, in the words of Mays Business School, or in the words of anybody else. It's how we're on this trajectory to improve life for those who are involved and those who are outside the walls. And so that's just all I have to do to position, and then bring along those who want to be a part of that.
That's all. That's it.
That's all.
That simple.
That's all. The saying in marketing is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And so
good advice for me.
Right? I have to constantly remind myself of that, especially when I'm like talking to my kid. I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. When I'm talking to my son, it's just like I'm using all these ridiculously high words that just go over his head as I try to explain these things. And I'm constantly reminded, like, simple, just simplify. And so it is simple, but it's also hard. Simple doesn't mean that it's easy. Just like we were talking about, in order to have a very concise speech, it takes a lot of work.
Sure.
It takes a lot of work to put that thought, that meaning, that perspective into a short speech.
Speaking so you can't be misunderstood, not just speaking so you can be understood.
So you can be heard, right? So you can hear your own voice.
Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So let's move to some rapid fire questions. What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
How do you answer that?
I don't know.
Man, I thought, okay, these were supposed to be rapid fire.
Top of your head.
That I've got it all together.
Oh.
And I don't.
You do come off that way.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay,
you
I
really
don't.
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. That is a big misconception.
You write a lot of things down. So you and I met once previously regarding this podcast,
Yeah.
and I was very impressed by how efficiently you seem to be able to take information in, and you write a lot of things down. What actually, I'm gonna skip away from this for a second and say, how do you keep a ton of written notes?
Yeah.
And my question is not why do you do that, but how do you keep it all organized in your head? I'm a spatial thinker, and I would find that so overwhelming. How do you keep it all organized?
I'm the same. I'm a spatial thinker.
Okay.
And so it's less about organization.
Yeah.
There's a saying within the Field Notes, the brand of notebook. It says, I'm not writing it down to remember it later. I'm writing it down to remember it now.
Huh.
And so I'm a visual learner.
Yeah.
If you talk to me, I'm not going to remember it that well.
Oh,
right. And so it's less about organizing it to find it later, unless I need to go and reference it, which I try to do. But the more important thing is that I'm taking that information in and I'm processing it and I'm putting something down on the paper to organize it for me now.
So it's almost as though if you were a blind person trying to read a book, you would need to have it on audio in order to translate it. So this is almost like you're almost being a stenographer for yourself.
Yeah. It's a second touch. It's a second way to convey that information so that it's multiple ways that you can see it, and like not just see it visually, but like see it in your mind.
Well, and it's kinesthetic too, because you're the one who's making it visual.
Yes. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
As crazy as it sounds, I would just love to dive into the head of Elon Musk. Like, what is going on with that dude?
That's
but like,
a good question.
He's clearly brilliant and misguided at times, but like just to have some insight into how he thinks and how he thinks way differently than me, right? Because not that, again, he's not perfect by any means, but like he's got 2, 3, 4 large, very, I would say, important organizations. And he is the leader of those organizations. And so I have a lot to learn from that man. And again, learning does not mean that I agree 100% with his ways, with his behavior, with anything about him, but we can learn so much from people that are different from us.
True. Definitely true. What is your fondest memory of TAMU, Texas A&M?
Many of those memories would get me in trouble, but right. Yeah. I think so. I'll do two. Okay. One being on the business side. And so I was a member of the Business Fellows class of 23. And during, I think, spring break, we got to go to New York on a class trip. And so I had torn my ACL and I was crutching around New York and it was crazy. But I think the most important thing, the biggest memory that I got out of that is that I got exposure to outside of Texas in a business sense. And it opened up my eyes. It opened up my realization that I have opportunity, a world of opportunity out there, and that it is possible for me. I was born in Texas. It is possible for me to get outside of Texas and to do something out there. Because as Texans, we have a lot of pride in Texas. And again, Texas is great. But I think that the perspective that you gain in being somewhere where you're not from, where you're not comfortable, is extremely important. The second one is that, again, this one would probably get me in trouble, but I won't say when we did it, but it was midnight. We got into Kyle Field somehow, and just, I don't know, that place is like sacred ground.
Sure.
And so running around on Kyle Field at midnight, and it wasn't like midnight yell or anything like that. It was just out there and acting ridiculous. So that was just a fun memory.
Did you guys have a football with you?
I think we did.
Seems right.
Yeah.
What kind of graft did you have for your ACL surgery?
Patella.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did allograft for the first one and hamstring tendon for the second one.
How long was your recovery?
The first one was, I was racing. I had surgery in October and I was racing in March, which is fast. But the graft ended up failing a year and a half after that. So I don't know if that was the best thing to do necessarily, but it was what I wanted to do. Yeah. And I had the second surgery. The recovery was pretty quick on that one too. Not quite as fast, but I couldn't play basketball. That's actually what got me into CrossFit. I couldn't play basketball because I had ACL surgery too recently. And so I wanted something that wouldn't be like high impact jumping and twisting. And so I got into CrossFit because it's, a little bit more sedate. So it is more sedate than playing full court basketball. But in terms of just impact on your body, I think CrossFit done right is very, very safe. Yeah.
So we're full circle here, right?
Yeah.
For the recovery, right? The instant regeneration, the instant recovery, right? So
brought it all the way
there's my
around.
superpower. But mind you, like, I'm assuming that you're in a good space right now with doing CrossFit. Like, you're really excited, really happy that you did that.
I think so.
Had you not torn your ACL, would you be doing CrossFit right now?
I probably would have eventually given it a try anyway, because I try almost everything. Yeah. Like, I've tried yoga, love it. I do some yoga every now and then with my lovely wife, Madison.
Hey, Madison. Hey.
Shouts to my wife. I've tried Orange Theory. Just to try it.
I've got a buddy that's really trying to get me into that, and I am the most frugal person that I possibly can be. Yeah. And so all this stuff, like, when I'm disciplined, I like to do these high intensity interval training workouts that are like 14 minutes, 18 minutes. Sure. And so I don't make time for these things. And so the idea of paying $100 plus a month to do these things, it just, I don't know, it gives me heebie-jeebies.
Heartburn.
Yeah, it does. It does. But okay, so going back, so we're taking a pause on our rapid fire real quick. So please, going back to full circle with CrossFit, right? You tore your ACL to do that. For me, when I tore my ACL, it was my junior year of college, actually my senior year of college. And so I was supposed to be, yes, it was my senior year of college. I went 4.5 years. So I had that summer. So I ended up, because of my ACL, I was laid up during the time where I should have been looking for a job, an internship, et cetera. Because of that, I got connected with my first job. Simply put, I had an internship there and got the opportunity because of that, because I was honestly like probably desperate, and it made me be a lot more bold in my ask towards my first boss out of school. And it was an internship that, I never thought in a million years would have turned into a full-time job, and it did. And so I think that we go through these things, these hard times, getting fired, having physical injuries, having something happen that we don't know why it happens, but then looking back on it, it's just so obvious.
Mm-hmm. The biggest gift that came out of the injury for me was there wasn't, I don't have anything to point to for, I guess the first time I tore my ACL. The second time I discovered CrossFit out of that, and that was really cool. But I don't know if there was like a life-changing opportunity that came from, especially from the first injury.
When was the first one?
It happened. We were playing against Texas, Rice, Texas, the only time we ever played on national television. And of course I tear my ACL in front of 60,000 people, and who knows how many more watching at home. That's still the most text messages I've gotten in a single day.
How many?
But, oh gosh, I stopped counting, but it was over 100 for sure. And this was back in the day when unlimited texting wasn't really a thing. So I was like, you guys are killing me here.
You had to like turn off your phone until next month just to make
True. So true.
See, again, back to the frugalness. I was the guy that like early on, I got my first cell phone when I was in high school sometime. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you only had 250 minutes. And so, if you went 1 minute and 1 second, then that would be 2 minutes. And so I'd be on the call and be like, 59, 50. Okay. All right. I got to go. Bye. So
that's true.
Yeah. So, but like, okay. So Ben, I challenge you to look back on that, and how did tearing your ACL that first time, how did it slow you down? And I don't want you to like slow you down, and what changed?
Well, it wasn't how it slowed me down. It was terribly difficult, because being an athlete, being a student athlete, was how I defined my existence at that point.
Yep.
And I had to learn how to grow past that. So that was an important thing for me. But I think, to be specific about how I grew as a person, there wasn't a specific opportunity that came out of it, but the way that I grew as a person was this. Before that point, my life had been a series of, I looked at my life as a series of obstacles that to that point I had always been able to overcome. And my approach to everything was muster your force of will and then ram yourself through whatever is sitting in front of you. And that's a good way to live in a very small section of our life. And it's a very bad way to live a whole life, because if you think about it, if the way you go about your interpersonal relationships is ramming yourself through whatever's sitting in front of you.
You mean that doesn't work for you?
No, go figure.
Yeah.
But so it softened me as a person. And I remember having conversations with my mom about it afterwards. She helped take care of me after the surgery. I wasn't really able to get around much, and she came down for a few days to help out. And I remembered there were certain things, and I want to be careful here, but there were certain things that my mom and I had discussed, certain difficulties that she was dealing with, that I remember thinking to myself and occasionally saying to her, why don't you just fling yourself through whatever it is that you're dealing with? And I remember her saying back to me, life doesn't really work that way sometimes. And I thought to myself, of course it does. This is everything that I've dealt with for the last 10 years. You just keep slamming yourself into it until eventually it goes away. It gets out of your way. And that was the experience that taught me sometimes courage does not, this is a quote, but sometimes courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet voice that says, I will try again tomorrow. And sometimes courage is in gentleness, and sometimes it's in humor, and sometimes it's in saying, I don't know the answer. And that those things were the most important things that I learned from that experience.
I love it. And just going back, I mean, we talked about sports really early on in this conversation, and so many people are in that same boat, that their identity is in success from sports or the obstacles that come from sports. And through that, there has to be this opportunity for us to break through that as we become adults, because the vast majority of us will not become professional athletes. And
That's right.
Even those that do, when they don't succeed as professional athletes, if they don't have an identity that is separate from their athletic self, then they're going to crumble when they fail. And I think in the same sense, as business people, we need to separate ourselves from our work. And even outside of business, we as individuals need to separate ourselves out from our work so that our individual value is based on something besides successes and failures. Because those things, while they have a little bit of influence in circumstances, our value is much different than those things. So, I recall there was having been in NASCAR, there was this NASCAR driver that was on the top of his game. A year prior, he had finished second in the standings of the championship. And, 1 year later, after that season, he up and retired. And this was the hardest working guy of all. He made a way for himself by pounding on doors saying, "Do you need a driver? I'm your driver." And he just up and retired, and just people didn't understand it. And I think that that's really interesting, because we're in a society that celebrity status, athleticism, fame is something of such immense value to people, that when someone says no to that or rejects that, people don't understand it. And so having gone through an experience like you've gone through, and what I've gone through of disassociating ourselves from this athletic success, I think was important, because then it was a relatively small failure. Yes, you tore your ACL in front of 60,000 people plus, but in comparison to what could have happened years later, it might have been just insane what it could have done to you emotionally, spiritually, physically, etc.
No question. We could talk for hours about this, but I think we should probably close out here. We end each session with Good Bull. This is an opportunity to recognize someone else for something good or great they've done. Do you have someone you would like to send some Good Bull?
Yes, of course. I just got to think about it. Where are we going to go with this? Who's going to be one that is listening to this? All right. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm going to send my Good Bull out to my team, my marketing communications team. That's Kelly Levy-Reynolds, Molly Painter, and Bree Pampel. They are some of the hardest working folk. They have such huge heart and huge passion, and they are so talented in what they do. And they really bring all of that to work with themselves. And we've gone through an immense amount of change. Even before I got here, they had been in this change. And so they do incredible work, and they're the ones that have been constant and steady within my realm. And I get to work with them every single day, and that's pretty phenomenal. And so I give my Good Bull to the Marcom team at Mays, and I'm excited for what's in the future for us, because we're putting out great products, and I'm looking forward to a great process to pair with that.
Beautiful. Blake, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. And props to all of you. This is fun. It's really insightful. It's really helpful just to get in here, do this, get different perspectives. And again, I'm that misconception about me. And it's funny. I do so many things wrong, and, off the top of my head, it's easy to come up with this stuff, but it's actually harder to do. And so I'm really thankful that we have a resource like all of you that are bringing this out of faculty and staff members to share with the world free of charge, because it's important to get this knowledge out. And this is a different way to get it out that I think that people will really resonate with and enjoy. And the biggest thing that they can do for you is to subscribe. And so with that opportunity, please subscribe, please download, please listen, please share with your friends, because I know that there's so much talent here, both in this room, but also within these walls of Mays Business School, and those who are traveling right now. There's so much talent there, and there's so much knowledge that they want to share, because we are a vibrant learning organization. We're constantly learning. And even through this process, I'm learning more about myself, learning more about all of you that will improve me. So thank you.
I don't know if I can add anything to that, or if I would want to add anything to that. So let's close it there. Thanks to our listeners, and again, thanks, Blake Parrish.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to stay up to date on our latest videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notifications. If you're in a rush or on the road, you can still join us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. If you want to learn more about us or our guests, please visit our website at mays.tamu.edu/podcasts. Also, please check out Mays Business School's academic programs. They're the sponsors of our show, and you can find them in the description. Thanks, and gig 'em.